The Hall of Verdicts was a cathedral of cold authority, built not for justice but for fear. It hung suspended above the molten surface of Arc Seraph, the Council's capital world, like a god's gavel frozen mid-swing. The chamber stretched for kilometers, its ceiling lost in a haze of golden light and holographic banners bearing the sigils of 10,000 civilizations. Each emblem shimmered, a reminder of the Council's power and its history of dominance. No sound existed here unless permitted. Even the air itself seemed to bow beneath the weight of judgment. This was where worlds came to be humbled, where dissent was rewritten into guilt. And on this day, at the heart of it all, stood humanity. Ambassador Helena Voss was the only human allowed to stand before the tribunal. Around her, a dozen alien delegates loomed from their floating platforms, creatures older than Earth itself, eyes glittering with disdain. The High Arbiter, a serpentine being of translucent flesh and burning eyes, presided from an elevated throne, his voice vibrating the metal beneath their feet. "Helena Voss of Earth," he declared, "you stand accused on behalf of your species of crimes against the Galactic Concordance, of trespassing into restricted systems, of tampering with relics of the precursors, of weaponizing forbidden technologies, and of undermining the stability of the interstellar order." His every word dripped with centuries of practiced superiority. "How do you plead?" Voss didn't answer immediately. She stood perfectly still, hands clasped behind her back, her expression unreadable. Her dark hair framed a face that held no fear, only calculation. Around her, the council chamber shimmered with thousands of watching eyes, broadcast live to the entire galaxy. Millions of citizens tuned in, watching the so-called upstart species stand trial for daring to reach too far, too fast. The whispers of the crowd rippled through the air like static. Arrogant creatures. They thought they could rewrite the stars. Now they'll learn humility. Finally, Voss raised her gaze to meet the Arbiter's burning eyes. "We plead guilty," she said simply, and the hall gasped as one. 1,000 translators struggled to process her words. The High Arbiter leaned forward, visibly intrigued. "Guilty?" he hissed. "You admit your transgressions?" "Yes," Voss replied calmly. "Guilty of curiosity. Guilty of ambition. Guilty of refusing to let others decide what we're allowed to learn. If those are crimes, then humanity stands guilty forever." The chamber erupted into outrage. Delegates shouted, their voices blending into a storm of indignation. "Insolence!" barked a Goran general, his chitin plates rattling. "Blasphemy against the Accord!" cried a delegate from the Zatel Dominion. The Arbiter raised his clawed hand, silencing them with a single resonant strike of his staff. "You mock this tribunal," he said coldly. "You stand in the House of Law and call rebellion virtue?" "I stand in a hall of hypocrisy," Voss replied. Her voice, though quiet, carried perfectly through the acoustics of the chamber. "You accuse us of violating rules written by those who feared discovery. You speak of stability, but what you mean is control. You've ruled this galaxy through secrecy and fear for 10,000 years. Every time a new species rises, you smother it under treaties designed to keep you comfortable." Gasps filled the air. Even the automated recorders hesitated, as though uncertain whether to continue broadcasting her words. The Arbiter's voice dropped to a whisper that rumbled through the floor. "Enough." Voss took a slow breath. "You call this a trial?" she said. "But it's an execution dressed as ceremony. You've already written the verdict. You don't want justice. You want submission." A pause followed, deep and heavy. Then the arbiter raised his staff again, its head glowing with the symbol of the council. "By the authority of the Galactic Concordance, humanity is found guilty on all counts. Effective immediately, your fleets are to be dismantled, your colonies occupied, and your research purged. You will surrender your rights to self-governance until the Council deems your species rehabilitated." The chamber roared its approval, a chorus of voices proclaiming their triumph. The humans, the young empire that had risen too high, had finally been put back in their place. Voss did not flinch. She stood unmoving, her eyes scanning the assembly as if memorizing every face. Then she stepped forward, her voice cutting through the celebration like a blade. "You think this is victory?" she said. "But history has a way of turning trials into funerals." The arbiter hissed. "What did you say?" Voss turned to the galaxy-wide broadcast feed, meeting the eyes of every being watching across 1,000,000 worlds. "You misunderstand us," she said, her tone almost kind. "You think we'll answer with war, with blood, with ships in your skies? But humanity doesn't always fight with guns." Her words hung like a whisper of prophecy. "Sometimes we fight with truth." For a moment, no one moved. The arbiter gestured for the guards, but before they reached her, Voss raised a small silver device, a simple communicator, one that transmitted on frequencies older than the council itself. She pressed a single button, and the device emitted a faint tone. "Then the order ends with you," she said. The transmission ended. The tone faded. The silence that followed was absolute. Voss was escorted from the chamber, bound and defiant, her expression unreadable. The council quickly moved to destroy the footage, to bury her words in classified archives. But it was too late. Across the stars, fragments of her final message leaked through the networks, repeating endlessly. "Then the order ends with you." At first, it seemed meaningless, a defiant phrase from a defeated people. But hidden within those 6 words was a signal, a code buried in the communication lattice, one that would awaken something the council had never seen. And as the High Arbiter dismissed the tribunal, satisfied with his verdict, he could not have known that in the deep, silent void between stars, humanity's revenge had already begun. Not through war, not through fire, but through the truth waiting patiently to rise. 3 standard days after the trial, the galaxy seemed to exhale in relief. The council's verdict spread like wildfire, relayed through the news channels of 1,000 worlds. Humanity submits to galactic law. The council preserves peace once more. The age of human defiance ends. Those were the headlines plastered across every major network. Crowds gathered in the shining plazas of core worlds to celebrate the reaffirmation of order. On Ark's Seraph, fireworks painted the night sky in radiant colors, and dignitaries toasted their victory. The young, brash species from the distant Sol Arm had finally been tamed. But far away from the glittering capital, in the dark between suns, something shifted. Out beyond the established trade routes and patrol lanes, where only the quiet hum of dying stars kept company with drifting wreckage, there were signals, faint, encrypted, and distinctly human. They moved between the shadows of forgotten satellites and abandoned colonies, bouncing from one derelict relay to the next. To the Council's surveillance drones, they looked like random static, old navigation codes, maybe even echoes from extinct beacons. In truth, they were anything but. Admiral Elias Ward stood alone on the observation deck of the SSV Indomitable, the last surviving dreadnought of the Terran Vanguard. His reflection stared back at him through the viewport, aged, lined, but unbroken. The ship hung in orbit above the barren world of Sargas 9, a planet officially declared uninhabited after the war. But beneath its surface, buried deep within the crust, a human facility still thrummed with power. It was one of hundreds scattered across the void. The vaults, they were called. Ward's second-in-command, Captain Lyra Zhang, approached quietly. "The transmissions confirmed, sir," she said. "It came from Ambassador Voss herself during the trial broadcast." Ward didn't turn to face her. His gaze remained locked on the endless field of stars. "She said the phrase?" "Yes," Zhang replied. "Then the order ends with you." Ward closed his eyes for a moment. "God help them," he murmured. Lyra hesitated. "Sir, we've been silent for nearly a decade. The fleet scattered, the colonies stripped. The Council's watching every known system. If we activate the vaults now, we—" Ward finally turned, his expression carved from iron. "We do exactly what she meant for us to do," he said. "You think Voss planned that statement just to sound defiant? No, it was the signal. The moment those words went out, every surviving human network woke up." Lyra's eyes widened. "The Whisper Protocol?" Ward nodded. "It's time." The Whisper Protocol had been humanity's insurance policy, conceived not by generals but by historians and coders, those who understood that empires don't just fall by bombs or fleets, but by ideas. Long before the Council ever placed Earth under sanction, human scientists had mapped the galactic data web, the lattice that connected trade systems, banking hubs, diplomatic archives, and AI-driven governance. Then, hidden beneath their communications algorithms, they embedded something small. Harmless-looking, dormant, a story. It wasn't a weapon, not in the traditional sense. It didn't destroy data or hack systems. It rewrote memory. It slipped into archives and restored what the Council had erased, records of wars they'd started, civilizations they'd enslaved, histories they'd rewritten. And it did so quietly, invisibly, across every connected world. By the time the Council realized anything was happening, their truth would be gone. Ward moved toward the control panel, his hand hovering above the activation console. "She gave the order," he said softly. "The truth wakes now." Lyra hesitated. "Sir, what happens when the Council learns it was us?" Ward gave a weary smile. "Then they'll finally understand that we don't need guns to change the galaxy." He pressed the command. Across the void, lights flickered to life on forgotten satellites. Buried servers began to hum, old human AIs stretching as though waking from a long sleep. Data packets, disguised as fragments of human art and literature, began seeding through the galactic net. A line from an old Earth poem appeared in the archives of a Zethian library. "We do not go gentle into that good night." A Terran folk song was discovered encoded within a star map, its lyrics rearranging themselves into coordinates pointing to extinct worlds the Council had buried. The digital web began to whisper, and every whisper carried a piece of the truth. Meanwhile, in the Council capital, confusion began to spread. On Arx Seraph, a historian in the Ministry of Truth froze as her terminal displayed a file she had never seen before, an ancient hollow record showing the Council fleets annihilating pre-sapient worlds to seize their resources. On the distant planet of Valoran, a data clerk noticed the official census suddenly including species long believed extinct. Across the galaxy, archives shifted and morphed, their contents realigning with reality itself. At first, the changes seemed like glitches, but as the pattern spread, panic set in. In the Hall of Verdicts, High Arbiter Senqual watched as the Chamber's record of humanity's trial began to distort. Voss's face flickered, the audio crackling. "You think this is victory?" her voice repeated. But then, for the first time, the rest of her message, previously censored, appeared. "And yet the stars remember. The silence you've built will shatter under the weight of your own lies." Senqual's claw tightened on his staff. "Who authorized this?" he demanded. His attendants scrambled, their displays flickering uncontrollably. "It's in every system, Arbiter," one shouted. "Every archive, every relay. It's rewriting everything." Outside the chamber, alarms began to blare. The Council's data core, a monolithic structure of living crystal and quantum memory, pulsed erratically. Whole sectors of information collapsed, replaced by fragments of the suppressed past. The galaxy's hidden scars were being dragged into the light. Back aboard the Indomitable, Ward watched the spreading chaos unfold through tactical feeds. A slow, grim satisfaction filled the command deck. "They wanted obedience," he said quietly. "We gave them memory instead." Lyra looked out the viewport at the glittering expanse of stars. "You think it's enough?" Ward's voice softened. "It doesn't need to be enough," he said. "It just needs to remind them who they really are and what they did to us." As the Whisper Protocol rippled through the stars, something extraordinary began to happen. Alien citizens across countless worlds started questioning the stories they'd been told. The Valari Union scholars began protests demanding full access to newly uncovered archives. The Yotal Empire declared an emergency moratorium on Council decrees until the data could be verified. The illusion of galactic order, the foundation of the Council's power, was cracking. And through it all, a quiet message kept repeating in every data stream, in every code, in every tongue. "Then the order ends with you." It wasn't defiance anymore, it was prophecy. And the galaxy was beginning to believe it. For centuries, the Council had ruled through control, not of armies or fleets, but of truth itself. They had written the histories, shaped the narratives, and buried anything that might threaten their perfect image of order. To the galaxy's younger races, the Council had always existed, an ancient, benevolent body that ensured peace and justice among the stars. But as the Whisper Protocol spread, that illusion began to fracture, and what lay beneath was something far older, far darker, and infinitely more human than anyone had expected. It began in the border worlds, where data lines were less regulated and AI oversight weaker. There, ordinary citizens were the first to see the changes. Archivists in the Karen Belt discovered thousands of new entries appearing in their public records overnight. Massacres, censored wars, species labeled eradicated for biological instability. Others found strange human symbols buried within their systems. The Terran emblem, the old Earth flag, the inscription, "Sapience belongs to all." At first, many dismissed it as a digital infection, another attempt by rogue programmers to destabilize the Council. But the more they looked, the more undeniable it became. The files were authentic. The timestamps matched known events. The Council's carefully constructed past was unraveling before their eyes. On the moon city of Ratha Prime, a Zalthorian historian named Krevik sat alone in his archive chamber, staring at a holographic projection that had appeared unbidden on his screen. It showed a fleet of Council warships orbiting a green-blue world, its surface burning. "Project Cleansing, Pre-War Revision 4, the title read. Below it, Species Designate, Human. His mandibles twitched in disbelief. He had been raised believing humanity had provoked the Great War, that they were the aggressors who sought to defy lawful order, But here, the footage told another story. The Council had fired first. Entire Terran colonies had been vaporized before the humans ever retaliated. He replayed the footage again and again, watching Council dreadnoughts bombard unarmed settlements, listening to the calm voice of a Council commander authorizing the strike. Purge the anomaly. No survivors. Krevik felt something inside him shift, a slow, gnawing realization that everything he had ever taught, everything he had believed about galactic law, might have been a lie. And he was not alone. Across the stars, others began to see similar truths emerging from their archives. The Vreli Federation discovered that their homeworld's mysterious plague had not been natural. It had been a Council bioweapon, used to suppress a rebellion sparked by human trade agreements. The Valoran League unearthed economic data showing that the Council's fair trade policies had funneled nearly all wealth into the core worlds, leaving the outer systems in perpetual poverty. Everywhere the data appeared, the myth of benevolence burned away like mist before the sun. The Council tried to contain it. They dispatched cyber war units, erased entire data streams, and even shut down the galactic network for 3 standard hours, the longest blackout in millennia. But the Whisper Protocol had already gone too deep. It didn't just infect systems, it replicated itself inside biological minds. Every time someone read a restored record, the information embedded itself in memory, and that memory became another point of contagion. Knowledge spread faster than light. On Arc Seraph, panic turned to rage. The Council's chambers, once symbols of serene authority, became arenas of shouting and accusation. Species that had served together for eons now pointed claws and tendrils at one another. "You knew," the Rithan delegate roared at the Triune of Crassel. "You hid the truth about the human exile. You let us believe they were monsters." The Triune hissed, its scaled form flickering in agitation. "We followed orders, as we all did. They declared it sealed for the good of the galaxy." At the center of it all, High Arbiter Senqual watched his empire crumble. He had once believed the Council was eternal, that its word was law, that the galaxy itself required their hand to maintain stability. But now, the streams showed billions marching on every core world, demanding the release of the full archives. The Arbiter's own AI advisors, supposedly incorruptible, began displaying fragments of human art, paintings of rebellion, of defiance, of light breaking through darkness. Then came the message. It wasn't from any known network. It wasn't encrypted through Council channels. It appeared directly on the central broadcast system of the galaxy, a feat thought impossible since the dawn of interstellar governance. Every screen, every holotable, every implant display lit up with a human face. Ambassador Mara Voss. She looked older now, her hair streaked with gray, her uniform tattered but proud. The image flickered slightly, as though transmitted through a storm. Behind her stood the battered insignia of the Terran vanguard. Her voice, calm and sharp as a blade, echoed through the void. "You tried to erase us. You buried our names, burned our worlds, and told the galaxy that we were monsters. But memory cannot be erased. Truth cannot be deleted. You built your empire on the silence of others, and we were the last silence left. No longer." The words struck like a hammer blow. Across the stars, billions stopped to listen. "We do not seek revenge," Voss continued, her eyes burning. "We seek remembrance. The Council's peace was never peace. It was obedience. And now the galaxy will decide for itself whether it wishes to serve truth or tyranny." Her transmission ended without flourish, without a sign-off, leaving the message to hang in every corner of space. The silence that followed was unlike any the galaxy had ever known. Not the silence of fear, but of awakening. In the following days, revolts erupted across the core worlds. Planetary governors resigned. Military fleets refused orders. On Carthium Prime, the Council's own enforcers turned their weapons on their masters. The illusion of unity shattered completely. Meanwhile, deep within the asteroid fields of Sol's outer rim, the human fleet stirred for the first time in generations. Massive shipyards hidden under the icy crust of moons powered up, their reactors glowing like buried suns. Dormant AIs, once sealed by treaty, began singing again, an ancient Terran hymn transmitted through encrypted channels. And though the galaxy was in chaos, one truth became clear to every sentient being who looked up at the stars: humanity had not vanished. It had waited. The Council's lies were ashes now, and in their place, a new narrative began to take shape, one that didn't belong to the rulers of the stars, but to those who dared to remember. The galaxy was remembering what it meant to be free. The galaxy had seen wars that spanned centuries, witnessed empires rise and crumble into dust, but never before had it witnessed a war fought not with fleets or weapons, but with truth. And yet, that was exactly what the Whisper Protocol had unleashed. The battleground was not space, but memory itself. Data streams, archives, even the neural implants of scholars and citizens became weapons. Carriers of revelation that tore down walls older than civilization. For the first time in living memory, the Council's authority trembled not under bombardment, but under the unbearable weight of exposure. Across the core systems, riots spread like wildfire. Entire planets refused to transmit tribute or obey decrees. The once unquestioned soldiers of the Council's peacekeeping armada turned their weapons on command ships, demanding answers from superiors who had none. In the Spire district of Arc Seraph, protesters flooded the avenues below the Hall of Verdicts, chanting in 1,000 different tongues, "Release the truth! End the silence! No more lies!" The air shimmered with static from overloaded holoprojectors, displaying humanity's once-buried history. The burning of Earth colonies, the cleansing of the Terran expanse, the executions of diplomats under false pretenses. Every crime the Council had ever justified in the name of peace now stood naked before the galaxy. Inside the Council chamber, chaos reigned. The High Arbiter, Senqual, watched as his delegates screamed at one another across the vast hall. The Rythan clawed at their translators, demanding the release of their historical archives. The Vreli accused the Jatel of collusion. The Triune of Crossel, once the Council's enforcers, had gone silent entirely, their homeworld now under siege by their own citizens. Senqual's voice, normally the embodiment of control, broke as he shouted over the storm. "Order! You will restore order!" But there was no order left to restore. The great holographic banners of the Council, symbols of unity and peace, flickered and died as the central network overloaded again. And then, in their place, the screens began to show something else. A signal, a voice. "Ambassador Helena Voss," said the transmission header. It couldn't be. She had been executed, publicly. Her death had been broadcast to every world to prove humanity's submission. Yet there she was again, her image grainy but unmistakable, her calm eyes staring into the Council chamber as if she were standing among them. "You silenced me once," she said softly, "but you can't silence an idea. You can't erase what lives in memory." Every delegate froze. Senqual rose slowly, his serpentine frame trembling with fury. "This is fabrication, a digital forgery." But the chamber's AI, bound to truth verification by ancient code, pulsed crimson and announced, "Authenticity confirmed. This recording is genuine." The blood drained from Senquel's translucent skin. Impossible. The transmission continued, her voice rising like a storm. "You accused humanity of arrogance, of defying order. You said we were dangerous because we would not obey. And you were right. We were dangerous, not because we sought war, but because we sought understanding, because we refused to accept ignorance as peace." Around the galaxy, every world saw the same message. It wasn't propaganda, it was history itself, played unfiltered, unedited, undeniable. Council soldiers firing on unarmed humans, dying children clutching Terran flags. And over every image, Voss's voice carried like thunder. "You cannot erase what you fear to face. Every truth you bury is a seed, and now they have all begun to grow." On Arc Seraph, the first explosion sounded outside the council chamber. Protesters had breached the outer security rings, driven by fury and revelation. Senqual's advisors begged him to flee to the evacuation tunnels, but he stood frozen before the flickering hologram. "They'll destroy everything," one of his aides cried. "The entire concordance will collapse." "It already has," Senqual whispered. "We just didn't see it dying." And far away, light years beyond the chaos, humanity watched. From their hidden bastions in the Sol system, from their colonies long thought dead, humans monitored the galactic collapse through ancient relay networks. Admiral Rhys Calder stood aboard the bridge of the Eidolon, the flagship of the hidden Terran Armada. The massive vessel had slept beneath the icy crust of Neptune's moon Triton for 2 centuries, silent and unseen. But now it was awake. "The transmission's complete," reported his comms officer. "Phase 3 of the Whisper Protocol is live across all primary networks." Calder nodded slowly. "And the Council?" "Fragmenting. They're turning on each other." A quiet hum filled the bridge as the ship's core reactors powered up fully for the first time in generations. The human fleet, thousands of ships built in secret, hidden across asteroid fields and nebular shadows, was stirring. Their hulls bore no insignia, no declarations of war. Only one message painted across each vessel's prow: "Truth will out." "We could strike now," said Commander Lyra, her voice sharp with anticipation. "Finish it while they're weak." Calder turned to her, his gaze distant. "No, that's what they expect. That's what tyrants always expect of those they oppress. Violence is their language. Ours is revelation." He looked out at the distant stars, where the faint glow of Arc Seraph burned like a dying ember. "Let them destroy themselves with what we've given them. We'll return when they're ready to remember what justice actually means." Back in the core, the Council's world fell apart in flames and shouts. As the great banners of authority burned, as statues of the High Arbiters crumbled under the blows of furious citizens, the galaxy stood on the precipice of transformation. Some races begged for human contact, for guidance. Others vowed revenge against their former masters. Through it all, the human transmissions continued, quiet and steady, a song carried through the void. Each carried not commands, not threats, but knowledge, scientific blueprints once restricted by the Council, histories once censored, art once forbidden. Humanity was not conquering the stars, it was liberating them from the darkness of ignorance. By the time the fires of Arc Seraph dimmed, the Concordance had ceased to exist. Its laws, its armies, its symbols, all shattered beneath the weight of truth. And from the ruins of the galaxy's greatest empire, a new order began to emerge, shaped not by fear, but by understanding. For the first time in 10,000 years, the stars belonged to everyone again. And the humans, watching from the dark, knew that this was only the beginning. The fires of Ark's Seraph burned for 96 standard hours before the skies finally dimmed. Smoke coiled like dying spirits above the molten plains, where the once great towers of the Council's capital had collapsed into molten ruin. The Hall of Verdicts, where humanity had once stood condemned before the galaxy, was now a crater. Its marble floors, once polished by the steps of 1,000 alien dignitaries, were shattered into fragments of history. From orbit, the planet looked like an ember floating in darkness, a symbol of an empire that believed it could silence truth forever. But truth, as humanity had proven, does not die. It waits, it listens, and then it speaks. Weeks passed, and across the galaxy, the aftermath unfolded with a strange mixture of chaos and awe. The Council's fleets, leaderless and fractured, drifted in orbit above dozens of worlds. Soldiers who once fought for order found themselves questioned by their own people. Colonies that had been under enforced silence for centuries suddenly burst into transmission. Songs, stories, broadcasts, even laughter. Voices long buried now echoing through open channels. Every race, from the smallest moon-dwellers to the grandest civilizations, found themselves asking the same question for the first time in millennia. If the Council could lie about humanity, what else had they lied about? The galaxy was breathing again, and in that uncertain exhale, something new began to take shape. On the hidden world of Kepler's Haven, one of humanity's secret restoration colonies, Ambassador Helena Voss stood before a gathering of envoys. It was not a council of domination, but of reconstruction. Around her were representatives from species that had once despised humanity, each of them scarred in different ways by the fall of the old order. The Vreli wore ceremonial bands of mourning for the knowledge their people had lost. The Chrysal Triune, once the enforcers of the Council, appeared as holographic projections, their physical forms in exile. And beside them, a group of humans, scientists, diplomats, soldiers, listened in silence. "The galaxy is watching us," Voss began, her voice steady but weary. "For 10,000 years, the Council told us peace was a cage we must be grateful to live in. They convinced us that obedience was safety, that ignorance was mercy. But now the cage is open, and the question is not whether we can live without our masters, it's whether we can live without becoming them." No one spoke. The weight of that question hung in the air like gravity itself. "We've seen what happens when power hoards truth," she continued. "We've seen worlds burn, species erased, entire histories rewritten to fit a lie. Humanity's vengeance wasn't fire, it was knowledge. But knowledge without wisdom is just another weapon. If we are to build something better, we must choose differently." Across the room, a Vreli scholar named Arcane rose on trembling legs. "And if others do not choose as we do, what then, Ambassador? What if they rebuild another council under another name?" Voss met his gaze. "Then we remind them," she said simply. "Every law we write will begin with the words, 'No truth shall be hidden.' Every archive will remain open. Every being will have access to the knowledge that belongs to all." Her words rippled through the chamber. This was not the fiery rhetoric of vengeance that had ignited the rebellion. It was something quieter, heavier, a promise. Admiral Rhys Calder, who had overseen the activation of the Terran Armada, stood beside her now, his once steely eyes softened by fatigue. "We could conquer half the galaxy right now," he said, almost to himself. "Our ships are active, our systems stable, our AI networks restored. There's nothing left that could stop us." Voss turned to him. "Then the real test begins, because now we have to stop ourselves." Calder gave a small, tired smile. "You always did hate easy victories." "I hate cycles," she replied. "And if humanity becomes what the Council once was, then all this, all the sacrifice, all the blood, all the silence will have meant nothing." Outside, Kepler's haven orbited a quiet sun, its surface dotted with rebuilding cities. From orbit, they looked like sparks scattered across night, tiny reminders of life enduring. In the distance, the faint hum of the human fleet drifted through space, still vigilant but no longer hiding. The ships that had once been built as weapons were now being converted into carriers, research platforms, and colony vessels. Humanity's purpose was shifting from survival to stewardship. But the galaxy was not yet at peace. Far beyond the former Council territories, fragments of the old regime regrouped in the shadows. Rogue admirals, exiled senators, and artificial overseers that had once enforced the accord whispered of vengeance. They promised to restore order, to bring back the light. Yet their broadcasts were met not with obedience, but with laughter. The people of the stars had learned to question, learned to think, and no tyrant could unteach that. On the fourth cycle after the fall, the first Galactic Assembly was held, not of nations, but of individuals. Each species sent not leaders, but citizens, engineers, poets, healers, explorers. It convened in orbit above Proxima Centauri, on a vast station built jointly by humans and their newfound allies. The assembly had no throne, no ruling seat, no single voice of command. Instead, a circle of equal stations surrounded a great central monument, the Beacon of Memory, a living archive that stored every recovered truth of the past age. Its inscription read, "Let no voice be silenced again." When the time came for the opening address, Voss stepped forward once more. Her voice was broadcast to the entire galaxy, not as an order, but as an invitation. "We are not here to replace the Council. We are here to replace fear with understanding, to replace silence with song, to replace rule with responsibility. We cannot promise peace forever, but we can promise never again to lie in its name." The chamber erupted in applause, not the mechanical approval once heard in the Council, but the raw, uneven sound of beings who finally felt free to feel. For the first time in 10,000 years, unity was not enforced, it was chosen. And as the crowd rose to its feet, the lights of distant fleets glimmered beyond the viewport. Human ships, old and new, stationed not as conquerors, but as guardians of this fragile new dawn. Helena Voss looked out into that endless expanse, her reflection framed by the stars. "You see?" she whispered, as though speaking to the ghosts of the past. "We didn't destroy the galaxy. We set it free." From the dark edge of space, a transmission pulsed across every channel, a familiar melody, once carried by the Whisper Protocol. It was the same song that had begun it all, once a warning, now a hymn. Across thousands of worlds, beings of every kind paused to listen. The message was simple. Truth endures. And for the first time in galactic history, the stars themselves seemed to agree.